Hello, everyone. I'm Caroline Pearce, and this is the Ripple Effect podcast. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for tuning in if you've not come back. This episode will be a conversation with Mel Larson, who is a coach and a marketer and a consultant and a real inspiration and a font of knowledge. And she's someone that I've known a little bit for quite a long time, probably around 10 years, but she's often been a speaker or a course trainer or something. So it's only in the past few months that we've got to know each other a bit better. And so when I invited her on, I wasn't 100% sure where she would take the topic of difficult conversations, and the topic of money is the main one that she came in with, and we touch on race, and we touch on money, and we touch on other areas where there are difficult conversations, because so many things of these, like, they interplay, they weave into together. But yeah, money is perfect, because actually so many of the moments where I can remember she said something significant that I've really taken on board over the years have been about relationship with money, and how actually people who are making a difference in the world need, in my words, need the best possible relationship with money in order to have the most impact. And so, yeah, this probably isn't going to be the last difficult conversation where we talk about how to improve our relationship with money and how we have those conversations. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, this is Mel. Hello, Mel. Thank you so much for joining me to have a conversation about difficult, tricky, or brave conversations. How do you describe you, please?
Hello, Caroline. Great questions. So, how do I describe me? Professionally, I would normally say, hi, my name is Mel Larson. I and my team help women entrepreneurs, change-making women entrepreneurs, to trust their vision and strategically call in more clients, income, and impact. So I would describe myself as a change maker, probably with a small c. I'm not out there in the world of politics. I'm not doing like global initiatives, but in my own small way, I think almost every day I'm actively looking for how can I make positive change in the world, typically through being a business coach. When I'm coaching people, I'm listening for what's the next hurdle they can jump over, what's the next thing they can transform in their life, what's the next goal they can achieve. I would also describe myself as a mature woman. I've been through the menopause, just come and survived to come out the other end. I'm a brown skin woman. I think that's worth mentioning in today's climate. There's a lot of conversation about who belongs and who doesn't. And I think the last thing I'll say is I'm happily married to a lovely Danish man called Peter, and that's an important part of my life. It's a hugely important part of my life, along with the love of my family members. So, oh, one other thing actually, I'm an artist as well as a business coach. I am a part-time artist, and I paint, and I about 3 or 4 times a year I go on painting retreats. So there's lots. It's an interesting question, Caroline, because there's a lot of answers you can give, but those are the top of mind things.
That's wonderful. And is for anybody watching, the picture behind you, is that yours?
Yeah, so that painting behind me, I did. It must be at least 20 years ago, and I just love it. So it's got sort of flecks of gold, it's got dripping ink on it, and sort of greeny, goldy, purpley thing.
Yeah, no, it's really lovely, and of course goes really well with your jumper.
Thank you. My green jumper.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. So the next question is on that topic of difficult conversations. What brings you to that? Like, where are you with that at the moment?
Hmm. Well, obviously, I knew I was coming to talk to you, and I spent quite a bit of time thinking about, what is a difficult conversation or a tricky conversation or a brave conversation. And I think you can't avoid difficult conversations in business. I run my own business. We have about 200 clients in all, some more light touch than others. I have a team of 6 associate coaches, as well as being a business coach. I'm also a consultant. So I'm like dealing with partners and associates and clients all the time. And I think wherever you put human beings in a room, at some point there's going to be disagreement. And the shape that that disagreement takes depends on the personalities in the room. It could end up in conflict, or it could be a fascinating conversation or a debate. But I think in business, there are going to be difficult conversations. And I think as a coach, you're going to have conversations that either feel challenging to you as a coach or to the client as they're working to break through whatever it is that's holding them back in that moment. Particularly in running your own business, I think in today's world, especially as an entrepreneur, I know whenever I say we have 200 clients, it sounds kind of grand, but actually I'm essentially a solopreneur with a part-time team around me. So when you're that kind of solopreneur or a small business owner, you very often have to be visible, and being visible can feel very difficult. And sometimes you have to comment on things. You have to say what you think about what's happening in the world or around you, or give your opinions, or just take a stand for the service that you provide. And that can feel incredibly difficult. In fact, it's one of the things we coach people on all the time is just being courageous enough to be seen or heard. For some people, literally being in this conversation with you would feel incredibly challenging to them and very exposing and very vulnerable. So, but there's also in business, you're negotiating quite a lot around things like money, like, price. Sometimes people want to negotiate with you on price. Sometimes you're having to communicate, not sometimes, always, the value you give. And that can be, if I've been in situations where I'm pitching to a table of middle-aged men in suits and they're firing questions at me and I have to convince them that I'm the right person for that contract. That can feel really challenging. So it's like, I could just go on and on and on about the challenges of running a business, which by the way, I love. I enjoy that challenge. But yeah, there's usually a challenging conversation around the corner on any given week.
Yeah, thank you. And the thing, like everything that you said there is interesting. The thing that I suppose I just want to acknowledge is even having a conversation about difficult conversations when potentially I'm not a brown skinned woman, and there's definitely going to be difficult conversations that you've encountered simply because of who you are. And
Yeah.
like, so I really acknowledge that having difficult conversations about difficult conversations can itself be a challenge. And what I'm really hoping to kind of to find out more about and help me learn, and everybody, like anybody else who wants to encounter the conversations,
Mm,
just learn to be how to be with that, how to
mm,
face into the things that feel awkward or tricky or that we have to be brave to come to. um and
mm.
so yeah, before we started recording, you said that like the money conversation might be the angle that you would have most kind of insight in, or big, and that in itself is fat. But yeah, what's in terms of any of the difficult conversations that you've had, what
Yeah.
feels most useful to dig into?
Oh my goodness. Well, before we go into, I'd love to talk about money because I think that's an interesting one, but I just want to pick up on what you just commented on. I'm so pleased that you lent into, the fact that I said I'm a brown-skinned woman, because a lot of the time that is still a kind of, I was going to say it's a taboo topic to talk about race in the UK, but I think that's started to come up now as something everyone's talking about, or, I'm sure there are lots of people who don't want to talk about it and pretend it doesn't exist, but it is coming up as a very challenging conversation for people. And so I'm just really pleased that you lent into that, because I'm assuming you're white, Caroline. You can never assume what people's background is.
No, and I haven't said I am
Yeah.
like Viking
Yeah.
white.
I sometimes I always ask now, because I remember I did a focus group many years ago, and someone said something, and I said, "Oh, is that because you're a white woman?" And she said, Actually, I'm not. I'm Anglo-Asian. My mother was Asian, and she did not look what you would say call kind of classically Asian." And I realised my ignorance, and of course apologised, but it's made me realise you don't know who people are, you don't know what their cultural, ethnic background is. So I try not to assume, in the same way that I try not to assume that someone, they might have a hidden disability for all I know. You just never know what people are dealing with and what their life experience is. So, and I find it amazing and very healing when white people want to talk about race, because for so many years it's been like this hidden thing that everyone's in denial about. And just to actually just nip into that topic for a moment, this weekend I spent some time with some lovely friends, and I was the only person of colour in a room for the three other white people, but they're all people I know really. I mean, one of them was my husband, and I know them most of them very well. And I was talking about the kind of loneliness I felt as a child, and just the sheer bewilderment of dealing with the racism I was encountering at that time, and the fear of it, and suppressing it all. And now, in my 60s, it's like coming up as something to deal with. It's always been there, but it's like every decade there's like a new layer to kind of unpick. For all of us, whatever our skin color, there's always something from childhood that comes up that you have to start dealing with. And what was really great was they listened, and some tears came for me, and I was able to really feel the full impact of those very intense childhood feelings I, at the time, had to shove down simply to survive. I was a little brown girl growing up in a predominantly white village in the middle of nowhere, at a time when no one really had started to unpick this topic very much in the UK. And so I actually welcome the conversation, even though I know for many people whether they're black or white, it can feel like a very challenging, intense, anger-inducing or fear-inducing or denial-inducing conversation. So, but yeah, I was actually going to talk about money. I mean, there are lots of taboo conversations in society, and somebody told me the other day, a PR expert, about this chart, and I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a something chart, and it measures what topics are acceptable to talk about in society or not. So I'm sure you would love to see. Oh, when I remember
Yeah.
the name, I'll let you know. And it obviously, this kind of measure goes up and down depending on what's happening politically and sociologically at the time. Um, but I notice in my line of work that money is a big taboo topic. Maybe less so in America, but I think in the UK, it's sort of still seen as a bit kind of uncouth, greedy, unspiritual to talk about money. And I feel like, how can you run a business if you're not willing to talk about money? I mean, it's like, unless you're a charity, you're probably asking for money, you're exchanging services for money. And so, yeah, when I was thinking about coming on here, I thought about what's the difficult conversation I've had around money. And I think there's like two things, and they're both connected. And one was the time when I realized, and this does actually link back to race, funnily enough, because it's all about our identity at the end of the day, and how comfortable do we feel about asking for money. And it comes up a lot in again in coaching people in their business is the notion of self-worth and how much we feel we're worth and how much we feel we can charge. And I do say I, self-worth, because although we're selling services, again, when you're like a solopreneur, you are by extension kind of selling yourself. Even if you have a team, it still circles back to you. I've coached people who have worked in corporate, they have this big brand behind them and they can be like really powerful and courageous. And then when they leave and it's suddenly them on their own and they realize, oh my goodness, I'm selling me, they feel like they lose their power. And it's interesting to coach people who are going through that. So there was a point, I've done a lot of work around abundance consciousness. I would say I'm relatively ambitious, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized money is actually a really important thing in life because it's such a great resource. And as well as being able to have a more comfortable life and more choice when you have more of it, when we have more of it, it's a great resource for making a difference. I love how, money can literally provide food or clothing for people. That's like an incredible gift to give. I'm very interested in giving. And so I did a lot of work on my consciousness around money, and that is a fascinating conversation. I did courses, I read books, I still do it all the time. And it really does boil down to our earliest memories, like what were our parents like around money? What did we get taught about money at school? What does our religion tell us about money or our lack of religion? What does our culture tell us? What do we see on the TV? What do we read in the magazines? And after doing all that work, I put my prices up and I put them up a lot. And I remember the awkwardness and almost like a feeling of shame around doing that, even though I knew it was a good thing to do. And as a woman, we haven't even talked about Gen Z yet, women in business and being powerful and, talk about women having difficult conversations. I think we have to navigate a lot of challenge out there in the world. Even just being ourselves can be seen as a provocation out there in the world of work or just in the world generally. So anyway, I put my prices up and I always remember, opening my mouth and saying to someone, this is what I charge, and the fear that ran through my body, that felt extremely difficult, and as I said, I had this feeling of shame and I used to go to Sunday school, so all the kind of Christian teachings came up for me. It's like it's wrong to want money, which is a bit of a head trip because, if you feel it's wrong to want money and then you're like, well, we need money to survive, most of us. It's a really strange headspace to be in. And then when that person said, yeah, great, we're going to book you, it was like this incredible movement into this new world of actually having enough. And then my next challenge was to learn how to hold on to that money and use it wisely because I had not been taught how to manage money. And I think a lot of people in this place, so many people have debt, so many people living beyond their means. And partly because they don't have the training that I'm really big on frameworks, so you probably hear me use that word a lot. They haven't been given the frameworks to help them realize money is this amazing resource that you can multiply and that you can manage. You don't have to fritter it away. So anyway, that was my first step in like I put my prices up and it opened up a new world, and then I had to learn how to manage it. And then I knew that I had moved forward when one day I was talking to a client and I slipped back into the old me and I quoted them on the call, which I try not to do unless I'm really certain, for this piece of work. And this wasn't coaching, this was consulting work. And I was being nice about money and I underquoted. And I was also trying to be nice by giving them an immediate answer, trying to be nice and accommodating. And we ended the call. I put the phone down and I just jotted down some notes. I looked at it and I thought, I have completely undercharged for this job, and that doesn't sit well with me. And the difficult conversation was I called them back and said, I've underquoted. This is what it would actually cost. And many people wouldn't do that. And it was a bit awkward. But I just knew I can't do this job at the rate I've quoted because I will end up resenting it. And it's just that it's not a good energetic transaction. And they were great about it. And I believe they were great about it because even though it felt awkward, I felt very, very grounded and strong in this isn't actually an authentic interaction and I need to make it authentic. And they were completely fine, and I explained why. And it helped that I called back within about half an hour. I just thought, and of course, I wanted to leave that conversation hanging. I did not want to pick up the phone and make that call. But I did it, and they said yes. And I knew then, okay, I've moved again into another layer of being empowered around this topic. And there's one other thing that loops into this, which is selling. So selling is very tied up again in our sense of self-worth, how we relate to others, how we feel about money. Because selling is you're providing a service, and it really is about helping people. You can't sell to somebody who doesn't want what you offer. I mean, you can try and manipulate them into it, push them into it, but it never works. And I certainly wouldn't want to do that. I've been at receiving end of that with other people who've like really tried to push me into buying something that's horrible. But really, selling is a form of service. But there is a point where you do have to switch from being all ears and thinking, is there a match here? And that person said, yes, I'm all in, to then having a conversation with them about, okay, this is what it's going to cost. And if they feel confronted by the cost, but they really, really want it, sometimes there can be a conversation that feels challenging around them having the courage to step into that relationship. It happens a lot with a product, or let me call it a service, like coaching, because coaching is super personal, and that person not only has to believe in you, they have to believe in the service you're offering, and most importantly, they have to believe in themselves and their ability to grow. So I've come onto this call with you, Caroline, thinking, what am I going to talk about? And now I can't stop.
But I just want to when you say that you called that client back within half an hour, like I was listening along and going, oh yeah, I think that I would get back to them. And as you said you phoned, I was like, no, I think I'd have emailed. And calling is so much better, isn't it? But
Mm.
yeah, like that doing something with resentment, you get to a point where you learn, and hopefully more people will learn sooner that if you're doing something with resentment, that like it's much better to find a way to do it without resentment, and whether
Yeah.
that's accepting or changing. Um, but yeah, that's so much better to have phoned back, because then you've heard their response, like you've had the awkward bit, because if you email, even if they accept, there's still an awkward conversation coming up or like at some point, or there's the awkward conversation avoided where at some point down the line when you've done the work it still might rear its head, and you've got that awareness and vigilance, whereas if you
Yeah.
had it right up front before you've agreed anything, like it's such a calmer place to go into that work from.
100%. And I think a lot of people do try and have difficult conversations by voicemail, text, or email. And there's a time and a place for all of those modes of communication, but there is so much room for misunderstanding with those modes of communication. And it doesn't really allow you the space to respond. If someone's got questions, or you can't hear the tone of someone's voice in those types of communication. So even though it feels excruciating at times, it's those conversations that are really powerful. Something that's popping into my mind, actually, I'm not going to go into detail on this one, but there's been a couple of times in my life where I've had to stand up to people who are attempting to bully me. And I could have sent an email, but those conversations required me to face up to my fears and talk to that person. And those were extremely challenging, extremely challenging. I've literally been shaking with fear on some of those conversations. But I do have a commitment to not allow people to bully me. I might let it go on for a while I'm working out what's going on, but once I'm really clear this is not on, I will confront that person and let them know I have boundaries. And it's hard. It's very hard, but it's like you were saying with the resentment, you were picking up that resentment thing. If you take on a job and you know you've undercharged, sooner or later, that's going to show up energetically. And it's the same in a relationship. If you're feeling like this person is messing me about, if you don't tackle it, if you don't nip it in the bud, it creates this energetic build up that just becomes so much worse further down the line.
Yeah. Um, I'm really curious to bring us back to the money topic
Yeah.
because it feels like there's such a can of worms, and actually in because I've been on various programs that you've run in like over the years, and some of the kind of the big moments that really stay with me are things where you've said something about money, and I've done a lot of work on money mindset, and it was definitely started from a program that you were running in the pandemic, and you said something about money, and I properly had this reaction about going, no, 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 read the room, Mel. Like I paid £7 to be on this program, and that's all I can afford. And like noticing that reaction alarmed me to then go, oh, why do I feel so strongly that
Mm,
we should be poor? Because in that particular context, and so yeah, lots and lots of work came off the back of that. But yeah,
mm,
what are your? I don't
mm,
like. Yeah, I'm not kind of summing us up at the moment, but
mm,
just tell us more about tricky conversations around money and
mm.
how to do that better.
Oh, well, that was interesting. I love that story you just told. And it was interesting you brought up the pandemic because that was a challenging time, obviously. And one of those events you attended, I'm pretty certain it was, I did a series of workshops to support people in pivoting and working out where they were at. And I had a lot of anxiety around doing that because very similar probably to what you were thinking. I was like, people are struggling right now. Who am I to run this event? And I had a sliding scale which went from, yeah, probably about £7, and I think it was 14, then 27. And what surprised me was e almost equal amounts of people paid at the different layers. Like, and it was what do you call it? Pick your level, pick the amount you want to pay. Pay what you can, that's the term, isn't it? So people who absolutely didn't have to pay that £27 paid that £27. And they knew that it was going to go to food banks. So, I gave the money to food banks, the ticketed income. But also at the end, I did a pitch for my program. And I remember feeling, can I really do that? Is that okay in this time to sell at such a time of crisis? But I love to, so in terms of my tip, I love to do have a win-win-win framework in my head whenever I'm doing anything. Particularly with that event, I was like, I want the world to win. It has to be something that I believe is doing good in the world, and that is through giving to, that money went to food banks. And I think by the end of the lockdown period, we'd raised about £2,000 went to UK food banks. And then the client has to win, i.e., people like yourself that showed up. I'm not just going to throw this together. I really want to hold space for people to know that they have some support at this time. By the way, that was difficult. That was a difficult conversation to hold because I constantly had that feeling of who am I to lead at this time when no one knows what the hell is going on. I don't know if I'm leading people down the garden path. I don't know what's coming next. I just have to trust my gut and know that pivoting is probably a good thing to do and that the people are still buying, businesses are still running, and people need to earn a living no matter what is going on. They need to find some way to survive this. And as it happened, that was the right thing to talk people through. But I didn't have a crystal ball to know that at the time. What was I talking about? Win, win, win. And then I win, which is why I pitched at the end because I thought I'm really giving a lot here. But I have a business to run too. And also, I'm almost certain that there will be people who see what I can do through this workshop, that is pay what you can. And some people will have enough budget to continue working with me, which turned out to be the case. And a lot of people joined the program that I was offering, which was relatively low cost, but it was still very interesting to see. So, what can I say about abundance consciousness? I think the first thing is I've used the word energy a lot in this conversation, and I'm a highly strategic, practical person, but I have this thing I call energy. I'm not like high woo, super woo woo. I'm not like using crystals and maybe a little bit of I don't really call it divination, like playing with creative thinking, I'd probably call it, where you can get these amazing insights. And I don't have a problem with people who do use crystals and do divination. I think they're amazing, but I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. But I think if you have a win-win-win framework, you you are consciously focusing on bringing good into the world. And I think we have to be careful in anything with anything that empowers us, such as money or even like status or, officialdom, leadership, because the human ego is incredibly powerful and it has this will to win and survive, where sometimes we can find we're putting ourselves first all the time or our ideals first all the time, and people can kind of get crushed in our wake and we're not even realizing it. And we're all susceptible to that. So I think it's really important to manage our own desires with reminding ourselves to give, because I think it's just a healthy mental balance. So, not everyone who works with money would agree with me around that, and that's okay. You don't have to be a good person to earn money. There are lots of people out there who I think are completely execrable who are wealthy, and there are lots of extremely good people who aren't. I personally like to balance it and have that in mind. I think it's just a good thing to do in terms of win-win-win. I think that it's really important if anyone listening who's like, I would really like to have more resource in my life, to have money and the resources that money brings. I think it's really important to learn and to read books. What I did when I didn't have money to spend on personal development is I would watch videos and talks on YouTube. You've got some of the top coaches in the world talking about these topics for free. There's so many free courses out there now. There's so much you can learn for free. And I read books. If you can't afford to buy books, you can go to the library, the ones that are still left. We have this amazing little mini library at my local train station, and I've picked up so many good books there. There's somebody in my local area who has good book taste. I
Amazing.
keep meaning to take some down there. Yeah. So learn about money, get interested in it, and build up your skills and learn the frameworks of money. Like one of the frameworks of money that I've been learning lately is about saving and investing. Saving is kind of easy because you just like putting money away. Investing is harder because it has a lot of jargon, it has its own language and it has its own systems. And a lot of them, honestly, I find kind of boring.
Hmm.
Like what is an EFT? What is the S&P 500? Those kind of things. And like remembering what they are. It's like learning a foreign language. And I don't
It
find it
is when you've not been in
yeah.
circles where it's commonly discussed. And
Mm,
that's another like massive generalization, but typically men that I know are familiar with those terms, like they're not alien terms. And yeah, I was a little bit noticing there's an advert on television at the moment where a restaurant goes from Geno's to Gina's, and she comes in and goes, oh, I've been investing for a while, and and then at the end, like the dad hands the key to the mom, to the daughter, as a kind of handover. And it just really dawned on me that when
mm,
you're not in conversations about investing or about money, that sort of thing kind of models that, oh, like when you get something like a restaurant in your name, often, oh, it just happens by magic. Like that's if that's the only story that you're seeing, which
yeah.
often women are not in those conversations, it's
Yeah.
kind of it looks like a mystery. It looks like magic that's going to come down like a fairy. And actually,
Yeah.
that's even an advert for like an investing app. And but then typically, so yeah, I'm a big fan of like, and now I'm a big fan of learning what those terms are and understanding the difference between trading
Mm.
and investing. And I don't know that yet, but it's on my list for future learning.
Good for you. And I'm still learning, by the way. I mean, there's a lot to learn around that. And it's interesting you brought up that example because there's one of the women I trained with initially, Barbara Stanny, who's written some great books around women becoming financially empowered, talks about this idea that women of her age were sold, and I think still to a certain extent, young women, that the prince is going to come and make everything okay. Like this guy's going to turn up on a white horse, he's going to manage all the money, he's going to bring the money, and our job is to stay at home and look at the kids. And there's nothing wrong with staying at home looking after the kids, but like at least have a choice around whether you want to do that. And actually, you can stay at home, look after the kids, and build up a kick-ass business at the same time nowadays because of the digital world makes it all possible. But if you don't know that's possible, if your parents never talked about it, if you weren't hanging out in circles where it was looked at, you're seriously missing out. And one of the things, by the way, I'm not like a super wealthy person, anyone listening thinking, hey, she's got it all handled. I don't. And I don't actually pay myself that much. I would say I'm like comfortable. I still have to think about what I'm spending money on. It's not like I can, I've got millions in the bank, far from it. But what I'm noticing is now I have more stability, financial stability. It's a fantastic place to be. I don't have any debt. Um, and it's not this kind of evil, greedy place that I thought it was before I moved into this zone. Like focusing on money is as healthy and important as focusing on fitness, like looking after our body. I think being chaotic around money is unworkable. And when I look back, like how I used to be around money, I don't want to go back to that state because it was fraught with anxiety and uncertainty. And it would have been great in my 20s if I had paid attention to those people who tried to say it's important to focus on this. I just thought, oh, it's really boring and it's kind of not spiritual, it's not heart-centered. And now I think how wrong I was, and I'm just really glad that in later life I, discovered there's this language that I can learn to speak that will actually make my life easier. So I think, learning, I would say to someone is getting interested and accepting that, yeah, it might feel a bit boring at first, because a lot of us, like, I didn't like maths at school, the way it was taught. I hated it. I thought it was boring. So then I developed an aversion to, in the digital age, spreadsheets. I just wasn't interested in any of that. And now I'm learning more. And I still have that feeling of, oh, investing can be kind of boring. But when the money starts coming in, when you start getting the interest, you're like, actually, this is interesting, And yeah, is there anything else I would say? I think it really helps to look at, I've been hinting at it all the way through this conversation, but to look at the social constraints on women, people of color, anyone who's kind of outside the kind of mainstream of, white male middle class, um, to not accept that discourse, that narrative that's handed to us, that it's money is for other people, like it's not for us. And by the way, I'm not saying that it's white middle class males who are perpetuating that because I think it's unconscious. I think it's like so embedded in society, it's hard for people to avoid in a way, but to wake up to that structure that says, you don't belong here, this is not for you. Actually, women do belong in the world of money. And there's a great book called We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers, who's an ex-lawyer, and she makes a great case for women, people of color, people with disability, anyone who's felt marginalized to become financially empowered because we often, especially women, use the money that we gain when we become financially savvy to benefit other people in society. Whereas men, there was this big study done on it, whereas men would like build these great monuments to themselves. Women would contribute to like community projects and aim to change people's lives. I know that there are many men who have done amazing things, by the way. I'm not a man hater at all, but it's just looking at that like overall pattern that it would be great to shift and to I'm very, very interested in patterns and social frameworks, social systems where we are focused on helping each other and helping everyone to rise. For me, it's common sense. I don't understand people who are like, the winner takes it all kind of mentality that we're seeing in a lot of politics and many parts of society. And it is complicated. I know that, there are a lot of leaders out there who on one hand are doing amazing things, or like tech bros who are doing incredible things in society that are going to help advance medicine and transportation, and then on the other hand doing things politically that are, I think, are pretty dangerous. So it's complex, and human beings aren't straightforward and perfect. And I'm not saying that women becoming financially empowered suddenly means that the world will become this magical place, because there are plenty of women leaders who've been dangerous and difficult. But I do think it will bring a balance, the perspective around what will it take to advance our species? What will it take to end hunger, to bring more equality into the world? Those are the things that I'm really interested in. And I do think we need to be resourced to do those things. I'm not interested in being a martyr and feeling exhausted at the end of every day, because I don't think that helps anyone. We need to have the resources to make change.
Yeah, I and I'm going to wrap us up quite like soon now, because like your insight is so valuable, and like that last point is like drives most of my work now, that like giving of oneself to the like giving to others at the cost of oneself is like damages so many people and so much work, and reduces the impact that you can have, and that's such a huge thing. um I've really heard you say learn, read, like stay open to possibilities, and that the narrative that you're telling yourself or that you're hearing from others, or that they're not necessarily true. And leaning into those conversations from a place of getting clear about where you want to be, or openness to what might come up in those conversations, like having it phoning back in half an hour, like if you know that that's what you should do. um is
Mm.
there anything else that you think, actually no, I really need to leave this as a tip for, like, here's your homework, listener, if you want it?
Um, I think I'm really echoing what I said before, but just thinking about it in one-on-one conversations. I always remember that one of my coaches said to me, I said to him, when I have a difficult conversation to have, I either go all in and I'm too brutal, I'm like too direct and it's wounding for that person, or I'm so nice and so diplomatic that they don't really know what it is I'm communicating. I don't know how to find the middle ground. And he said, be straight with people, but leave them empowered. And I've never forgotten that. Like, you can say what you need to say, but you don't have to destroy someone's sense of self-worth in the process. And that has always helped me have challenging conversations, to respect the person that I'm talking to, even if I disagree with them, and to respect my own needs as well. So it's somebody else's tip really, but I'm handing on his words of wisdom to your listeners.
Yeah, and to me, like, that's the thing. I'm doing this because I want to learn and I want to share that learning. So, but that's really good. Like, be straight and leave them empowered is such a useful kind of motto.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Mel, thank you so much for your time. Please tell us all the places that what we should do. How do we follow you? How do we get involved in your world?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. So I'm going to keep it short. What I would love for anyone who is a entrepreneur, and I work mainly with women, but we do have male clients as well, so it's anyone really, is to go and check out the a free guide that we offer called the Wealthy Changemaker Checklist. So this is a 6 or 7 page document that will help you work out. It's really about getting clients. That's why I'm saying it's for entrepreneurs. So it will help you work out what area do you need to look at in order to take your business to the next level. So, if you're finding you're not getting enough clients or you're not making enough sales or you're not getting enough flow in your business, that's the first port of call. And so I know that Caroline, you'll leave a link for that after we
Yeah,
finish this. And then if you just want to find out about me generally, you can go to the website, which is dreamprojectcoach.com. I'll leave it there because you'll find everything you need in those two places.
everything from Dream Project Coach and a link for the Wealthy Changemaker checklist.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Everybody have a lovely day. Thanks for joining us on our inquiry into difficult, tricky, and brave conversations. Please like and subscribe and join the conversation over at theripl.substack.com. That's THERIPL.substack.com.